Right of reply to Pendulum open letter to the VP by Laolu Akande. My dear Bob D. One could have easily made up his mind not to read or respond to anything you wrote after seeing the rather unprincipled queuing up behind Senator Bukola Saraki and then abandoning him, moving on to former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, and then deserting him as well. But I felt one should respond to your attempts to create a false narrative from the very hollow lamentation of the recent elections as the worst in our history. In my view, those like your good self, veteran journalists, who have built a formidable platform in the public arena must strive always to use the platform for the larger public good. There have been several interventions from you that reflect such true public spirit, but some of us stridently disagree with what at times could be perceived as a self-serving journalistic conduct. Many would seem to agree that this was obvious in your recent open letter to the Vice President, Professor. But first, let me thank you for your gracious words of congratulations to President Muhammadu Buhari and the Vice President, and your admiration for the VP's commendable performance in office. I am certain that your quest for public accountability derives from that admiration. It is important to state that a citizen's open letter to public figures or government authority is always welcome here and not necessarily a matter of right or exclusive access. For us, such matters of access for the people to their elected leaders is of normal cause and ought not to be a matter of exclusivity, nor should we make a play of it as so special. As is typical of your propaganda machinery, it begins with an outrageous lie by the principal, then the operatives like yourself repeat it ad nauseam. It appears you were not in this country when foreign and local observers accepted the results. Independent foreign observers commended the transparency and credibility of the presidential and National Assembly elections. Also, the Independent Election Monitor Group, supported by the French Embassy, concluded that based on the analysis carried out in this document as well as the actual observations of the election activities across the country, it is election monitors' considered opinion that the 2019 presidential election results are consistent with the will of the majority of voters who took part in the elections, notwithstanding the various infractions which also occurred, as they were not on a scale significant enough to affect the overall outcome of the election. http://electionminute.org blogspot.com/2019/03/analysis of 2019 Nigerian presidential. HTML. YAG Africa's parallel voting tabulation, relied on by international agencies, embassies and funders, also said its findings show that for the presidential election the All Progressive Congress, APC, should receive between 500% and 55.8% of the vote, and that the People's Democratic Party, PDP, should receive between 41.2% and 470% of the vote. These figures are consistent with the official results as just announced by INEC. For both APC and PDP, the official results fall within the private estimated ranges. That YAG Africa results statement was based on reports from 1,491 polling units, which are 98.4% of sampled polling units. YAG Africa's projections were reportedly also consistent with the officially announced vote shares for the other 71 parties who contested in the presidential election. It is also believed that the group's projections were based on the results announced in the polling units and would have detected any significant manipulation occurring during collation at the ward, local government area, state and national levels. Also, official results for turnout and rejected ballots were also generally consistent with YAG Africa WTV estimates. https://www.vanguardner.com/2019/02/YAG Africa verifies election results/ These are empirical facts, my dear Bob D., especially if your analysis through any rigorous tests. Propaganda and falsehood only need a willing sponsor. Yes, observers mentioned pockets of violence and some malpractices, but none felt that these were sufficient to affect the credibility of the elections or its results. Frequently cited Dizago Palace in Lagos. One unit in a city of 20 million. In any event, the real question is, how did the violence in the comparatively few places where it happened favor the president? And how come the strong allegations of foul play by the likes of Godswill Akpabio in Akwa Ibom, George Akume in Benwandama Igba and Cross River State, all APC senatorial aspirants, escaped your eagle eyes? It is sometimes forgotten, and Bob D., you chose to forget, that for the previous 16 years before 2015, the P2P governments had conducted elections. Everyone is familiar with the incredible excesses of the elections, and the Election Observer reports so poignantly describe some. In the 2003 elections, which gave Atiku Abubakar and his boss a second term, Wikipedia observes that millions of people voted several times. The police in Lagos uncovered an electoral fraud, finding 5 million false ballots. But the 2007 elections got even worse reviews. Following the presidential election, groups monitoring the election gave it a dismal assessment. Chief European Union observer Max van den Berg reported that the handling of the polls had fallen far short of basic international standards, and that the process cannot be considered to be credible, citing poor election organization, lack of transparency, significant evidence of fraud, voter disenfranchisement, violence and bias. They described the election as the worst they had ever seen anywhere in the world, with rampant vote rigging, violence, theft of ballot boxes and intimidation. One group of observers said that at one polling station in Yenagoa, in the oil-rich South, where 500 people were registered to vote, more than 2,000 votes were counted. Your choice of words such as theater of war to describe the presidential polls is not only inaccurate and questionable by and large, but also surprising considering the recent history of past presidential polls. And you have to tell us who described the elections as the most dreadful and desperate? Besides this facts that you carefully chose to ignore, the contents of your letter read in part like a brief for the opposition, and, at other times, a judgment of an electoral tribunal in favor of the opposition. And such bias undermines the credibility of the author such as yourself. It could even render the write-up confusing rather than informing the readers. For good measure, Bob D., maybe we should just remind our readers that not only are you an active member of the opposition, you have also benefited from significant business relationships with some in the opposition circles. And this is entirely within your right. But that certainly discounts your assessment about the direction of our administration. It also devalues your criticism of the narratives that hold those who raped this country in the past responsible for the consequences of their corrupt activities while in government. One also wonders whether it is your well-known personal relationship with the opposition that has beclouded you so much that you seek to assail the anti-corruption efforts which ordinary and well-meaning Nigerians have embraced. Let me make it clear that the facts show that while some old members of the opposition have joined APC, that has not shielded those responsible for corruption and graft. In any case, even if old PDP members are now APC members, the current leadership of the country under the APC stands out as it is made up of two gentlemen with impeccable integrity. Old PDP members and all Nigerians are welcome just like sinners are embraced in the church. In fact, the church was open for sinners to be converted. And what is skewed about the anti-corruption campaign when the two governors who have now been convicted for corruption are both APC? Having said that, be rest assured that the APC as a party will articulate its defenses to any allegations. For the records, it is an obvious fact and this must be reiterated that the Buhari administration has a commendable record of respecting the independence of NEC, a clear departure from what occurred under previous administrations. This government also ensures that it provides all the support NEC requires, as well as respects the independence of the judiciary and has ensured that security forces act within the ambits of law. Even international observers have made their comments accordingly and positively. As the Buhari administration always noted, every single loss of life is sad and lamentable. And previous elections have regrettably caused even far more losses. We must achieve an electoral system that doesn't result in any such loss of life. However, the record of improvement from the past is clear as it were. To characterize the will of the people as Pyrrhic victory represents what exactly needs to change and about our nation. Indeed, our privilege as elites imposes the responsibility of trustees of power, wealth, values and direction of and for a nation in the interest of the people upon us. To narrow this interest or substitute our amplified voices as the vocal minority for the silent majority is not only taking liberties a little too far, but also losing tune and touch with our national realities. As leaders, we must reflect introspectively on how we have prioritized the people, and how we must continue to do so going forward. This is what President Muhammadu Buhari is known for and it is what played out in the elections. It is the voices of the few and the devices of the privileged that the opposition regarded and expected to hold up. That did not happen. We respect the right to disagree and exercise that right through the established mechanisms, but we reject any denigration and the diminishing of the electoral outcome which is the true voice and expression of the people of this country. As you noted, the whole concept of sin in the worldly context is a violation of the law of the land, and in a spiritual context, a violation against God. That you judge either as a matter of law, or ecclesiastically when you by yourself determine that this administration is committing sin is a departure from what your letter identifies as its objective. Victory in an election is a nation speaking up, while the victor is the symbol of that nation's victory. Both life, by its temporal nature, and the Constitution, by its term limitations and periodic elections, already ensure that we all know that everything but eternity is transient, and the example of that in our nation today is the rejection of the old order 4 years ago, and the most recent confirmation of that rejection by preferring the new and current order, and the next level of our national restoration and growth. Finally, thank you for declaring your belief that the APC would have won a handsome victory because that was exactly what happened. It is your equivocation about Atiku's loss expressed in the same letter where you said you expected an APC handsome victory that left me and other readers confounded. What are we to believe? Again, thank you for your open letter. Be rest assured that the Vice President and the President would continue working for the good of all Nigerians in the next level.